Welcome, everyone. My name is Shamus Madan. I am the host of the MBIT podcast, one of the top 2% of podcasts in the world. We've interviewed many people such as Mark Cuban, Tim Draper, Spencer Raskoff, the former co-founder and CEO of Zillow, and many more coming on in the future. I am also a venture fellow over at Blitzscaling Ventures. We analyze late-stage venture cap startups that have the potential to scale super quickly and blitzscale, as Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, puts it. He's the advisor to the fund. So first, we're going to be talking about Gen Z and venture capital. And before we delve into that, we really want to understand where venture capital is going for the next generation. And to do that, we have to understand where it is now and how it's evolving. So VC tends to be more of a power law curve where the distribution of returns is not normal, but rather it's more skewed towards a small percentage of firms that capture most of the returns for the industry or for the venture capital industry. And recently, this has been going through a major shift. So we can take a look at this in a few different phases, and I analyze them in four phases here. Phase one would be Palo Alto. That's where venture capital is really started in the United States. And yeah, so we first start off with Palo Alto in Silicon Valley. That has been known for venture capital starting point for the United States. And as we progress and as venture capital has expanded, we go into our second phase, which is tier one metropolitan areas like New York City, over at Union Square Ventures is a big venture firm over there, and LA, and a big venture firm over there would be Graycroft. And then we go into phase three, which would be tier two cities like Austin and Boulder. And venture capital just keeps expanding like this throughout these cities. And now we're starting to enter a phase four, which is the natural progression is that Silicon Valley moves everywhere. Every city has people capable of building incredible companies. And in order to allow for the natural expansion of Silicon Valley, you need the infrastructure to allow it to exist. And we need Silicon Valley to be digital for it to keep expanding and growing that at the rate that it has. And that's what we're doing over at Valley. That's what Valley is building. I'm the lead partnership manager for there. I'm sure we can figure out a way to throw some links somewhere, either in the chat or in the description, to sign up for the wait list and stuff like that. But yeah, so the natural expansion, moving on a little bit, of Silicon Valley is that it will be global, right? We already have a lot more venture dollars flowing international. For example, there have been a 600% increase in venture dollars flowing between the coasts. 10 years ago, there were 36 cities with more than one unicorn. Now, today, that has been more than roughly a 4.7 times increase. Now we currently have over 170 unicorns in cities, and there's more than $250 billion venture dollars sitting as dry powder. And finding asymmetric returns occurs by discovering locations for startup talent and building and company building that others have overlooked. That means Silicon Valley must play on a global scale, right? So we need Silicon Valley. Take what you think of Silicon Valley. Just what do you think of when you hear Silicon Valley? What do you hear when you hear those two words? Now we have to take that and move it to a global scale, right? So long gone are the days when founders need to graduate from Stanford, move down the road, go to Y Combinator or a top accelerator, then get funded by A16Z, Excel, or Sequoia. That, to be clear, that trifecta is still a very powerful one, but it's no longer as necessary of a building block to a successful outcome as a founder, right? So a social layer to replicate the communities created in version one of Silicon Valley, or phase one, can be critical to the growth and success of this space and of this expansion. And that's what Silicon Valley is all about, discovering the undiscovered. And we have to figure out how to do that on a global scale, on an international scale, for everybody to reach. And we want to put Silicon Valley in your pocket because Silicon Valley is disrupting the world, right? 30 years ago, there was one densely populated location of startup networks. Startups were founded, discovered, funded, and mainly scaled all in one place, right? So the talent pipeline was 10 miles away at Stanford. The capital pipeline was 10 miles away on Sand Hill. And the office was probably somewhere in the middle. Now, when I was talking to Lee Jacobs, he's a pretty well-known angel investor. He's now doing some stuff with Cyan Bannister over at Long Journey Ventures. He moved internationally to talk to a couple entrepreneurs to think about investing in their company, right? And the way he introduced himself is he could tell that they weren't very interested in the beginning on hearing what he had to say. But he said these two words that completely changed the entrepreneur's outlook on the other end of the phone. And what he said was, I'm from Silicon Valley, right? So he included that point, or I'm from San Francisco, right? And he included those two words that added the credibility to his name, right? So I think that's one of the things we saw back in the day, a couple decades ago, and now we're starting to see this on a global scale, where Silicon Valley isn't just a location, but it's international, right? So it's a place, it's a form of ideas, founders, venture capitalists all over the world. And over the past 25 years, we've seen this slow dispersion of these resources move across the country and around the globe. Now, one major, very impactful event to the world, very negative, but also in some ways accelerated significantly the growth of this. We saw this out of Valley, so out of Silicon Valley, to the point where by the end of this year, 40% of commercial space in San Francisco will be empty. And I believe Silicon Valley market share on early stage funding has continued to loosen, with a 25% drop in the past 6 years and 7% expected this year alone. So the point here is that there will be a disruption of people combined with the proliferation of tech talent globally. And this has led to the startup ecosystem becoming incredibly disconnected, right? We have ideas, talent, and money have never been further apart. As we mentioned earlier, right? Think of Silicon Valley. You add the money, the founders, and the ideas. We're all within just a couple of miles apart from each other. Now you could have the VC firm funding you be hundreds of miles or thousands of miles across, all the way across the globe or internationally, or across the United States, right? And then the actual idea and founder could be somewhere totally different, hundreds and thousands of miles away. So current platforms like LinkedIn and email can be helpful to this, right? Because you can connect with people and you can reach these people, but they're not the be all end all. They don't completely solve the problem for you to connect. And I don't believe it's the current right way to connect with people, because it's a very binary enforced reaction. For example, the cold email or cold DM, right? And in this space, relationships can be very difficult to build, especially through cold messages. And it's very difficult to do that virtually, right? I know when I started my podcast, I emailed over 100 different people all around the world. And it was very difficult to get a response. I think I only got a couple of responses. And now I'm getting a much higher conversion rate than I did before with the guests I've had on the show. But initially, it was very hard to do that. And even now, it still can be difficult to maintain those relationships and keep up with those relationships virtually, right? There's a totally different aspect in your brain that's triggering versus when you go up and shake someone's hand and introduce yourself to them versus you're sending some text through an email. It's very different. A totally different type of relationship is built. But yeah, so I think ever since, when we take a look at what's happening, right? Ever since COVID, we had this explosion of nomadic life, right? Airbnb's explosive growth during COVID, and then distributed work, international talent pools, and people have realized the diminishing importance of physically being in the Valley. There are more people in tech than ever before, more startups than ever before, more dry powder than ever before. But for the first time in history, these trends are not location attached, but rather ubiquitous around the globe. So here's what this means, right? Today, the Valley is an idea. It's where ambitious, committed risk takers go to change the world. But as these communities leave the Valley and percolate and spread across the globe, the way the Valley operates needs to evolve with it. Now, when we're analyzing, shifting here a little bit, when we're analyzing the concept of reaching Gen Z in venture capital, we have to ask ourselves, where's Gen Z spending most of their time? And after thinking about it, you can tell that's mostly with platforms such as TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and Instagram Reels. For example, on TikTok, the hashtag venture capital has over 54.9 million views, and the hashtag entrepreneur has over 18.9 billion views, right? This is ridiculous for these types of numbers and to have this type of reach for a specific industry. We haven't really seen that before, and that's where the internet has played a major role in this expansion. As we said with those numbers before, that's how the internet has been super helpful to this. Now, I started exploring through this a little bit, right? So I had my MBIT podcast. A majority of the audience listeners are in Gen Z. I think mostly because I I spread my age, right? I say I'm 16, 17. And other 16, 17-year-olds or people in high school want to see what this 16 or 17-year-old is doing. So that's how most of my audience is in the Gen Z. But I knew that wasn't the be all end all. There was a way to reach more Gen Zers interested in venture capital, interested in having insanely smart business ideas and ready to change the world. So knowing this, I decided to embark on a new mission and start MBIT Shorts, which is a YouTube short channel that I've created just 8-10 months ago. And today it's expanded quite rapidly in the past 8 to 10 months. So originally we've had it start off at 0 views, just like any channel does. But today it's boasting over 3.17 million views in just less than 8 to 10 months. And the way we've been able to do this is we have to take a look and break down this content, right? You have really just a couple of seconds to grab somebody's attention. How do you do that? One is with the hook. The second is with the content in the YouTube short. Now, I noticed originally I was trying to compete with all the 8-second YouTube shorts and TikTok dances that were apparent on the platform just by keeping my content as 10 to 12 seconds long. And I noticed that wasn't really helpful. It wasn't informative enough, and it didn't have enough information in depth that I could get in my podcast. So I originally stopped because it wasn't gaining the traction. It couldn't get to the depth that I wanted it to, and I stopped. But then I took a deeper look at it and realized it doesn't have to be 18 seconds. It could be 30 seconds, or 40 seconds, but you have to figure out a way to keep the audience engaged and provide value on a level that you haven't seen before. Right. So, for example, one of my most recent shorts reached over 8,000 views. Hopefully we can, I don't know if we'll be able to put something up here, but if not, there'll hopefully be a link in the description where you can check it out. So one of my YouTube shorts reached over 8,000 views in less than 6 hours, right? This is really astonishing, something we don't really see, haven't seen in the past couple of years. It's been a very disruptive industry with TikTok. And in terms of venture capital, there's some very big players starting to take a role. For example, Harry Stebbings with 20 VC. I believe he's got tens of thousands of followers on TikTok. We got Rex Woodbury, Index Ventures, and then Josh Richards, who's very well known on TikTok with tens of millions of followers. He's partnered with Animal Capital. So I guess to wrap it up here, venture capital is changing in a way we've never seen before. Now, we can obviously connect these back to past historical events and really connect the dots here, but it's really going through a major shift. And we have to recognize, how are we going to reach the next generation? To do that, we have to find where the next generation is, and we have to figure out, crucially understand how it's evolving. How do we get there? And that's what we're hoping to do over at MBIT, reach the next generation of entrepreneurs. If you know anybody who's interested in checking out the podcast, it's MBIT Podcast. You can find it on any podcast player. But yeah, I hope to see you in a future episode, or on the MBIT Shorts channel. Feel free to check it out. Anything you see there interesting, feel free to send me a message. Hopefully we can get my email somewhere. But yeah, I appreciate it.